The areas of Ziegsturhl and the cemetery are some of the first places seen in the retail version of Blood Omen, and the same is true of the Alpha. But where a lot of things are the same, they're also quite a bit different. Let's look through some of the changes. For starters, Kain's death at Ziegsturhl is a lot more sudden and hard-hitting than the retail, with little chance to avoid the killer blow. This kind of breaks the illusion of choice at that moment and doesn't give the player much opportunity to put up a fight. Using the walk through walls command, it is possible to dodge the blow, but this is prone to glitches, including rendering Kain a moving corpse. Of course, like the retail game, this isn't actually the real Ziegsturhl at this time, but a copy that's unconnected to the game world. Exits are blocked, so it's not really possible to escape, and even with walk-through walls there's simply nowhere to go. Even the single open doorway in the retail doesn't exist in the Alpha. The opening cutscenes play out as usual, albeit with some minor musical changes, and Kain awakens in his mausoleum. Here, the environment is much the same as in retail, although there are a couple of minor differences, such as the changing of the shape of a single section of Spike Pit, and the changes to vista design, switch design, and manual activation mentioned in the miscellaneous video. A pair of hidden doorways can be found in the darkness, just off the intended map area, requiring the ability to walk through walls to reach them. One on the left leads to the developer's level select, while the other on the right leads to Vorador's mansion. The left doorway is actually still present in retail.
The sanctuary spell enables me to travel to my crypt where the soil of my grave provides me respite. I often resort to this when I am weak and need nourishment.
Perhaps the biggest change here is the dialogue used when Kain picks up his first Heart of Darkness item, which has a number of different lines depending upon the build. The Alpha here states that the heart is that of Janus Audrin, and can be used over and over, but consumes magical energy from those using it.
Reputed to have been ripped from the chest of the greatest vampire to have ever existed, Janus Audrin, the Heart of Darkness restores vampiric unlife. It can be used over and over again, but always consumes magical energy from the one who uses it. Life is precious, Janus discovered, as it was torn, throbbing and bleeding from his own body.
Of course, that doesn't exactly correspond with the multiple hearts which can be collected. So a later version, found in the betas and among the cut dialogue files in the retail version, amends the line to say they're those of Janus's victims.
I knew of the legend of Janus Audrin, a vampire who exists as but a whisper in shadow and night. The hearts of his victims lay scattered through the realm as a testimony to his hunger. These hearts of darkness restore vampiric unlife.
The retail returned to a clipped version of the original line, with the magical explanation omitted.
Reputed to have been ripped from the chest of the greatest vampire to have ever existed, Janus Audrin, the Heart of Darkness restores vampiric unlife. Life is precious, Janus discovered, as it was torn, throbbing and bleeding from his own body.
It was ultimately left to Amy Hennig to explain in interviews several games later that the hearts were not actually those of Janus, but were merely relics or representations of the real thing. Moving on through the mausoleum, one room is absent here that is added later on, with retail featuring a branch that leads to the left to a prisoner in a vial, and to the right to a prisoner in a rune triangle. In the alpha, only the left room is present, and it features both power-ups, and only one prisoner.
The world had changed to my eyes. I had not expected such cruelty from the light. For in the embrace of the sun I could find no comfort, only malice. This would change.
Leaving the mausoleum leads out into the wider cemetery, and a number of differences immediately become apparent. Perhaps the most obvious being the extra crypt in the middle of the area. In the retail version, that area would become a graveyard, filled with developer names in Bloodscript. This in turn completely changes the way the cemetery is tackled. In the retail, Kain enters the second crypt, progresses through an underground dungeon to emerge on the other side of the cemetery, where he can exit and proceed along the trail. In the alpha, he instead visits each crypt in turn, completes a small dungeon area, and activates a switch, which opens the gates between the cemetery areas, allowing him to reach the next area of the cemetery. This progression method means the alpha has more trails and gates that were removed after this version, whereas the retail has more unused grassy areas with extra gravestones. The internal areas of each crypt have a series of simplistic puzzles, which seem intended to teach the basics of the mechanics of switches, levers and boulders, and have a number of rotating pipe puzzles that were only seen in the lightning dungeon in the final game. Along the way, Kain encounters a save altar, which uses a deleted line.
The grave gives shelter to a weary vampire. Within the shadows of this tomb, I may rest.
While some of the areas in these crypts are unfamiliar, many were reworked into the second crypt encountered in the retail game.
curious devices hurl bolts of whirling energy and eviscerate my human enemies by stripping ragged flesh from blood-stained bone.
The southwest crypt remains as a side area to be explored later. However, its contents differ from the retail game. And it doesn't link to the southeast crypt beyond the river, which is unenterable and has a trail leading off into the next map area, where the trail ends abruptly. An interesting fact about this area is that the Alpha crypts use map areas coded as Map 7, Map 8 and Map 9, with one particular map code, Map 13, unused. Later versions have the second crypt at Map 13, with totally different, somewhat secretive areas filling in those previous map areas, with Map 7 relating to the Lost City, Map 8 relating to the HMCS Bitter, and Map 9 relating to the altar of Hashak Gik, nearby the Hell area beneath Avernus Cathedral. None of these areas exist in the Alpha. In fact, while we're on the map codes, the Ziegsturhl and Cemetery codes in the Alpha are 190 and 191 compared to 170 and 171 in retail, which shows there's more in the world map in general. Following the trail back to Ziegsturhl, we get to see the real town during daylight, and it's much the same as retail, although with some swinging sign effects, some extra lampposts, and at least one signpost is added after the Alpha stage. The tavern lacks the back door to the Flay Spirit Forge, and indeed any attempt to cross the bar results in Kain freezing. A number of changes are seen in the interior of the northeast house. The retail game will gain a chair, a barrel, and more muted wall colours. After leaving Ziegsturhl, Kain comes to a bandit camp populated by his killers. In the retail game, his confrontation with the bandits takes place on the trail between the cemetery and Ziegsturhl. But here, it comes after Kain has passed through Ziegsturhl, in a special area, complete with a campfire. The retail version of the area still has the section present, but takes out most of the identifiable features, and diverts the trail across it so it just looks like a patch of grass. The Alpha marks the bandit confrontation with a particularly gory piece of deleted dialogue before Kain kills his murderers and moves on.
As the last of the brigands fell, I leapt upon him, ripping his throat with my teeth and drank of the hot blood that gushed forth. As the torrent of blood ended, his body collapsed to the floor. I was forever changed. I knew what I had become. Their sneering faces were forever etched upon my memory. I had crossed death for this moment. My mind was empty save for one thought. I would kill.
There he is! Kill him! You bastard! We put you down once, we can do it again.
One interesting thing to note before leaving the Ziegsturhl area is that its trails and waterways are a lot more open than its retail counterpart. No inaccessible bridge is found in the south of the area, and the streams can be used to reach other areas, though it may be advisable to use Mistform to do so. The streams to the northeast and northwest are longer in the Alpha and lead off the map to Nakcombe and the Wolf Cave area respectively. While the southwest river leads to the river flowing through the cemetery. The southeast stream leads off the world and crashes the game.
The masters look to the pillars and gain way to the fortress of the mind.
The necromancer had offered me no warning as to what my resurrection would entail, and yet I must confess in my haste I had not sought one. Was his gift a curse? I would seek the pillars for an answer.
Following the main trail takes us to our next destination, the expanded Lake of Tears.